So I just found this bug lying here trying to camouflage itself. Wasn't even moving and I noticed it because of its unique shape. See its legs are sticking out, how the surrounding legs are darker than the tree bark? That's how I was able to spot it. See the big stinger at the bottom? These things pack a powerful sting. These are actually known as horseflies. You do not want to touch them. They deliver very powerful stings. They're, I think, a type of, I don't think they're a horsefly. I think this is what you define as a horsefly, I believe. Yeah, it's a horsefly. It's actually a type of mosquito because, yeah, that's either a horsefly or a giant mosquito. Definitely has a good abdomen. Has a, you know, that's either a stinger or its tail, but I don't want to take any chances. Because, you know, if it's a stinger and I get stung, who knows what happens. I mean, I've got stung by a Portuguese man of war in Florida. I actually got stung right here. Right on my ankle. What happened was, it was a beached man-o-war, and it just clipped my ankle. One of the tentacles did. It's not a jellyfish, it's actually a bunch of organisms combined into one being. It's like, I can't really describe it, but it's they call it a, but it's not a jellyfish. It's a bunch of microorganisms living on the tentacles, and that delivers a powerful venom that causes the severe pain. I got the severe pain. It lasted only for about 20 minutes. It went away. No allergic reaction developed, which is very unusual because a lot of people, many people, a good percentage, are actually allergic to man-o-war stings, and I'm thankfully not one of them. I actually panicked. I was going to call 911, but when I noticed no allergic reaction developed, I was really lucky. I was actually out tracking thunderstorms that morning. This was actually about a little over a year ago. This was April 2014. I don't remember the exact day, but it was a nasty, nasty sting. That's all I can tell you. It didn't actually become swollen. It felt like, I'll tell you what it felt like. It felt like, you know how when you hit your ankle on something hard, and it swells up? That's what it felt like. It didn't feel like a sting. It felt like somebody hit it, like I twisted my ankle. That's what it felt like. The reason it didn't feel like a sting, but later felt into like a throbbing, like the pain where you hit it, that's because it was actually hitting the nerve receptors of the interior tissue. So it wasn't just surface, it was also tissue pain. You were actually getting pain. I was actually getting pain from the tissue damage itself. That's why these bugs, you never know, they could pack powerful venom. That was actually a poison. Oh, whoa, whoa! That bird is chasing a bee! Oh my god! I just witnessed a dog fight. Literally. A freaking, like a big bird chasing a tiny bee. That's what you see a lot of. You know, a plane chasing another plane. I don't know who won. I just saw robin chasing a bumblebee. Probably trying to eat it. I don't know if you saw that, but I just saw that. My camera quality isn't good enough to catch that. Well, I just caught that. Wow. I mean, that was incredible. Just talking about bees, and, you know, bumblebee was, you know, it was either a big, it was either a beetle or bee, but it looked like a bumblebee to me. They were I didn't know robins were predatory. Those little, you know, birds you see, probably they're protecting its nest, or probably it was predatory. I mean, yesterday in Manhattan, I noticed a couple red-tailed hawks, which I usually see mass. That was probably pale male, you know, one of those famous hawks that have the nest in one of the skyscrapers. Probably one of them I saw in Manhattan. You also got a lot here in Queens. If you're lucky, you could see one flying around. It's a little windy today. Winds are about 15-20 miles an hour. I'm going to switch the subject now to weather. What's going on in Europe is incredible. England and Northern Europe is having one of its coldest summers on record. You want to know why? The North Atlantic Oscillation is negative right now. You have a negative NAO. You've got a very strong pool of cold Arctic air. Basically, I'm going to call it the 32-degree line, which usually north of it, you get snow in the winter, even in the fall. I've never seen the 32-degree line get this far south in the summer. I mean, I've seen it one time in August, like towards the end of August, maybe the beginning of September. You usually see this pattern in the end, like in the middle of September, like it actually getting that cold. Never seen this before in the summer. It's extremely rare, and actually this could actually cause the Arctic ice to stabilize because of all that cold air that's just sitting over the European part of the Arctic Ocean. It's actually good news for Arctic sea ice this year. Antarctic sea ice is actually still above normal, but it took a sudden turn to the left. So the increase is going, average increase is going like this. But Antarctic ice the last few days did a slow down rapidly. The growth of the ice slowed down rapidly due to a big storm I believe in the Ross Sea. There was a big storm, and that kind of broken up some of the ice again. So Antarctic sea ice is still doing above normal, but we took a sudden turn to the left. I was looking at the Antarctic oscillation. It's been going up and down very high, strongly, but it's been above it's been in a positive section the whole time. But it reached very positive levels and then crashes down to near neutral and goes back up. And it's these crashes that causes the Arctic ice to break up. That's when you get these big storms. Usually if it's zonal, more stable, you get more Antarctic ice. So for this winter, I've been repeating myself a lot lately. I'm predicting a cold winter. I don't know if it's going to be as cold as last year. I still have to see how the NAO plays out because of all that cold air that's sitting over now. Usually if the NAO is very negative in the summer, it may trend more positive in the winter. So I still have to check towards the fall how it's going to be. But all other signs, other than the NAO, are all pointing towards a cold and snowy winter. Last year we had a cold and snowy winter. Record snow in Boston, though the NAO was mostly neutral and positive because of the anomaly of the East Coast combined with the Pacific North American pattern, which is positive. So you got clipper systems that came down from Canada, went down south, and when they hit that anomaly, they blew into major storms and became a nor'easter when they came up. Like they blew exponentially. Like, I mean, when you hear storms that explode, I mean, that was essentially the meteorological bomb, except it was a clipper system. But if we get a subtropical connection, we can get a storm that goes up the East Coast with Gulf of Mexico connections that could blow just as fast, but it'll be moving a little quicker and it won't be stalling out. But still, this could lead us to having big storms. If the NAO is neutral or slightly negative, you can get the storms being pushed back a little far to the west and get big snow totals in the New York City area. If the NAO is positive, it'll be more to the south, and like mid-Atlantic and southeast could get it. So a positive NAO would be more like a quick moving storm that just goes across the country, crisscrosses the country, and stays far to the south. If the NAO is negative, very negative, you can get even to hook back in, like Sandy did, and actually bring warm air. Like Boston, one time in 2010 got rain when New York City got all snow. I'm just going to give you a lot of examples of this. New York City, this winter, look out. Another cold and snowy winter is coming our way. And for Boston, I'm predicting another bad one. Maybe, definitely not as bad as last winter. But still, it could be bad. It could be 80, 90, 100 inches of snow. Who knows? The big player is the North Atlantic Oscillation. That's going to be the major factor this winter. We already, like the major player, we already know the El Nino is in a big effect. We know we're going to have a tropical and subtropical connection from the Pacific, adding all that moisture in. But if the NAO could become negative with that anomaly off of Alaska and the East Coast, big storms this winter. I'm going to predict for New York City 50 to 70 inches of snow. This is, I know this is a lot. We've gotten a lot of snow last couple winters, and I think we're going to get more this year. Temperature-wise, maybe not as cold due to the El Nino, but it's still going to be very cold. And if the PNA goes very positive, we could still get cold. So right now, I'm going to forecast a below average temperature for the Northeast and definitely for the upper Midwest. The Pacific, that's questionable because the PNA is going to be positive. So the precipitation may be a little further to the north than usual, but still, I think California is going to get a lot of rain this winter. A lot. I mean flooding, mudslides, you name it. California is going to get a lot of rain. And I hope, but I really hope, this is my hope, that California gets a lot of rain, but over long periods of time, so it doesn't lead to all that mudslides. And I'm just walking around in Corona Park, enjoying the fresh air, expressing my thoughts on the winter. So going back to California, a lot of rain this winter. I'm talking about more Northern California. Southern Cal will get rain, but if only when the PNA drops negative. So, where do I get this info from? From the National Weather Service. NOAA releases their climate summaries, and I also have a lot of friends in the meteorology. I have a lot of friends and other fellow weather enthusiasts who give me their input on how they think the weather's going to be. And I'm basically combining all of their ideas into how I think the winter's going to be. This is not my ideas. These are not my ideas. This is just based on normal cyclical patterns. Do I think climate change is occurring because of global warming? Absolutely. Yes, these cyclical changes are still occurring, but just because England's having a cold winter without unusual cold, that's because of the North Atlantic oscillation. Still, you're getting all these cycles, but the cycles are going like this, but going up as they oscillate over decades due to climate change. Because I've been looking at a long-term climate since about the 1950s. You know, the oscillations are maybe every 20, 30 years. Overall, everything's just been going up. CO2 is rising exponentially. Why? Most of carbon emissions from Earth, from man, does not come from factories or from cars. It actually comes from biomass burning for clear-cutting forests in order to make grazing land. So by not buying from sources that contribute to this, like soybeans, like soybeans and beef, you're actually contributing to less carbon emissions. By being vegetarian, knowing where you buy your things, and, you know, saving energy when you need, you could be cutting your emissions by 60 or 70% and not really having to change your lifestyle. How do I think climate's going to be over the next 30, 40 years? Another major player is the sun. If the sun goes into another Maunder minimum, we could be talking about lowering global temperatures, but this will be for a few decades until the sun revamps itself. Either it will be slightly lower or stable, or the temperature will stabilize. Why will it not go much lower? Because the exponential rise of CO2 will kind of cancel out the sun's lower activity. And also in New York City, you're getting a lot of these fruit trees growing. They've been around for as long as I remember. And yes, these fruits are edible. I don't know what these are called. These are like blackberries, but they're not. They are edible. These fruits are edible. I've been eating them for many years. They're actually very natural. These are essentially a very natural source of vitamin C and antioxidants. Because they have a sweet taste when they're ripe. And I've been eating them and I've never gotten sick from them. I mean, this is a natural fruit tree growing in New York City. It's been planted. See? Been planted for, I think, for people to be eating. They always bloom, usually not in July. Usually they bloom actually in May and June. So we're a little behind. They'll all be like they'll all be gone by now. So a little behind because of how cold this winter was in spring. But as I said, England's getting it really bad. What forms of energy do I think will help propel mankind into a new prosperous era? And possibly even make the entire Sahara Desert into a fertile grassland? The name, it's called a molten salt reactor. The molten salt reactor is essentially a nuclear reactor that doesn't use uranium but uses thorium. I'm specifically talking about the liquid fluoride thorium reactor, which is a meltdown-proof nuclear reactor. Why is the reactor meltdown-proof? Well, speaking in technical terms, most nuclear reactors only operate at 200 degrees Celsius, which is roughly equivalent to about 700 degrees Fahrenheit. So to do the math, you got to do 200 times 1.8 plus 32. So it's actually, no, about 400 to 500 degrees. It's not hot enough to really make powerful steam. What you gotta do is, you have to then pressurize the reactor in water. With water, you gotta fill up the whole reactor with water in about 70 to 80 atmospheres of pressure. Earth's atmospheres of pressure, in order to make steam work efficiently. The molten salt, and the problem with these reactors, what you call the light water reactor, the heavy water reactor, these reactors are prone to catastrophic meltdowns if several steps are not met. Like, for example, what happened in the Fukushima Daiichi plant, you had a tsunami knock out all the diesel generators, you had a tsunami knock out the power to the reactor, combined for a hydrogen explosion because of all the heat just building up. The hydrogen levels reached critical levels and caused the reactor to explode. It wasn't a complete core meltdown, but still, it was bad because the core still was in the water. But still, it was a meltdown. It was a partial meltdown. And Fukushima is unfortunately still leaking as we speak in the Atlantic Ocean. Overall, what's more hazardous to human health? It's coal. Every year, coal and fossil fuels kill 3.5 million people globally. That's a lot. 3.5 million people around the world die each year from carbon emissions. Chernobyl and Fukushima combined only killed maybe 5,000, 10,000, maybe a few 100,000 birth defects at worst. But still, that's bad. That's still not good because of the meltdowns. But then you look at, what do you look at? Look at coal. Coal accounts for millions of deaths and millions more birth defects, like autism. Autism is caused by mercury. Coal plants emit tons of mercury. I bet the rising rates of autism around the world are caused by emissions from mercury, because the mercury then gets in the fish. Mercury is a big cause of autism. So it's not really the vaccines, it's actually coal. That's why people in cities who used to live near coal plants have high rates of autism. My parents lived near a coal plant in the Soviet Union. It could explain why I have Asperger's. Possibly, possibly not. But coal is a major contributor. The molten salt reactor doesn't have these critical problems that today's nuclear reactors and coal plants have. They don't need to be pressurized. Why? Because the reactor operates at 800 degrees Celsius, 700 degrees Celsius, which is high enough that the reactor doesn't need to be pressurized. Why? Because the nuclear fuel melts naturally and it becomes molten in nature. Salt is a natural coolant in the reactor because if the reactor reaches very high temperatures, the salt expands and blocks off new fuel coming into the reactor. And then while the reactor cools from lack of fission, the salt contracts, and once again the reactor more nuclear fuel flows into the reactor. The salt is mixed in with the fuel. Is the reactor actually dangerous? In terms of a meltdown, no. In terms of waste, yes, there is waste, but 99.9% of the waste is gone because this reactor recycles the waste. And that 0.01% of the waste is actually only radioactive for a few hundred years versus a few thousand, a few 100,000 years with today's nuclear reactors, which are outdated and need to all be deactivated. Every single nuclear reactor today needs to be deactivated. Not upgraded, I mean deactivated and replaced with molten salt reactors. And these molten salt reactors can continue to serve humanity until fusion comes available in about 100 years. So it's about the bridge between fusion and fission. Which countries need these reactors more than the United States? Developing countries. By turning away from coal and embracing safe nuclear energy, responsible nuclear energy, it could save millions and millions of lives. The reason these reactors were not adopted was because they were not capable of producing weapon-grade material. Plutonium-239. It produced uranium-233, which can be used in bombs, but without the plutonium-239 that the molten salt reactor does not produce, they said, no, we cannot produce, let's not make the liquid fluoride thorium reactor since it doesn't produce 239. Uranium-233 is a very high energy dense material. It's about the same as uranium-235, which we use in our reactors today, but it's very rare. Thorium-233 is 4 times more common than uranium, but uranium-233 can only be made by man, by fissioning, by technology, by hitting it with a proton, and then neutrons break off. So the good news about these reactors is uranium-233 emits very powerful gamma rays, which is good and bad. The bad thing about it is you have to be in a lead suit to be near that reactor. People are not allowed to enter the reactor at all, since it really operates without human intervention. Like today's reactors need human intervention to be perfectly safe. But going back to the molten salt reactor, say 1 in a million chance somebody tries to sneak some uranium-233 out of the reactor, which is impossible because you have to open the reactor, which would kill anyone. So essentially, you can't take it out of the reactor. If somebody did take it out of the reactor, nuclear sensors will go all over the world. They will immediately pinpoint where that stolen material is, and it can never be used in a terrorist attack, essentially. So this reactor is theoretically safe. Theoretically, it's very safe. In practice, we don't know because it hasn't been used yet. But it doesn't produce plutonium-239 as easily as today's reactors do, which is why the United States military chose not to do it, because it took too long, according to them, to make nuclear weapons during the Cold War. So they essentially favored war over free energy, over cheaper energy and cleaner energy. But now that's changing. Countries around the world like India, China, and even some countries in Europe that were formerly against nuclear energy are now embracing molten salt reactors. Essentially, countries that are against nuclear weapons are embracing it as well. Some countries in Africa want to do it now for peace purposes. You really can't make a powerful bomb out of it because it essentially messes up the electronics of a bomb and makes it literally impossible to explode or detonate. So, what are the other benefits other than that from the molten salt reactor? The other benefits is that it can use high temperature material so high that you could actually harvest carbon and oxygen from the atmosphere to make gasoline and fuels. You could desalinate seawater, but that desalination of seawater could now be left to graphene, which can be done more efficiently. So the molten salt reactor doesn't need water, so it could be efficiently done in the desert. So countries that are far away from bodies of water could actually now use nuclear energy without needing to be near a body of water, which means, guess what? You don't have to worry about nuclear material leaking in the water. But the moment the nuclear material leaks from the reactor, it solidifies immediately because the molten salt reactor needs to be above 400 degrees. The material has to be above 400 to melt. That's the melting point of the reactor, of the material. So it operates at 700, so it's molten salt. If you lose power to the reactor, there is no meltdown. It just simply eventually is just going to solidify, and that's it. And then you can't set up the reactor again, so you have to then transfer the material into another reactor or just leave it like that. But essentially, it's harmless type nuclear reactor. That's about all I'm going to talk about. So when I'm gonna post this on YouTube, I'm gonna break this into parts. Part 1 is going to be about the bug. Part 2 is going to be about the weather. Part 3 is going to be about the nuclear reactor. Well, thank you for watching and have a great day. Bye.